You know what
Backpacking America
is, right?
It's fucking awesome.
It's Backpacking America, an analytical podcast. All right, so Trump made a big boo-boo today and got one of his phone calls leaked. Definitely not one of the first times this happened to the president. But basically, he met with his legal team and the Secretary of State of Georgia, and he was trying to find like 11,700 votes because that's what he thinks the Georgia election was off by. The people he met with in particular that I'm going to mention from this article from the Washington Post. The only reason I'm mentioning the Post in this is because they actually provided a transcript of the call, which is going to be way easier to read back to y'all here. So in the call is Brad Raffensperger, who's Georgia's Secretary of State, and this guy urged with Trump was urging this guy to repeatedly alter the outcome of the presidential vote in the state. And Raffensperger was joined by the White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and several lawyers, including the longtime conservative attorney Cleta Mitchell and Georgia-based attorney Kurt Hilbert. And Raffensperger was joined by his office's general counsel Ryan Germany and Deputy Secretary of State Jordan Fuchs, I don't know. So we're going to scroll to the part that I think is really interesting, and this is where Meadows actually steps in. Is it where Meadows steps in? Okay, so Meadows is basically, I'm going to paraphrase this, and I'll link the article in the description of the podcast, but basically Meadows is like, hey, Raffensperger, let's, work something out here. The president mentioned Fulton County, where some of these disputed votes are, and there are allegations where we believe that not every vote or fair vote and legal vote was counted. I don't know what that means. A vote is a vote. And that's at odds with the representation from the Secretary of State's office. So let's kind of work together. And Raffensperger was like, well, I listened to what the president has just said. And I'm going to read this word for word because this is nuts. President Trump, we've had several lawsuits, and we've had to respond in court to the lawsuits and the contentions. We don't agree that you have won. And we don't. I didn't agree about the 200,000 number that you'd mentioned. I'll go through that point by point. What we have done is we gave our state Senate about 1.5 hours of our time going through the election issue by issue, and then on the state House, the Government Affairs Committee, we gave them about 2.5 hours of our time going back point by point on all the issues of contention. And then just a few days ago, we met with our U.S. Republican congressman, and we gave them about 2 hours of our time talking about this past election. Going back, primarily what you've noticed about here, what you talked about here, focused in on primarily, I believe, is the absentee ballot process. I don't believe that you're really questioning the Dominion machines, because we did a hand retally, 100% retally of all the ballots, and compared them to what the machine said and came up with virtually the same result. Then we did the recount, and we got virtually the same result. So I guess we can probably take that off the table. I don't think there's an issue about that. And then Trump's like, well, Brad, not that there's not an issue, because we have a big issue with Dominion in other states and perhaps in yours, but we haven't felt we needed to go there. And just to, maybe put a little different spin on what Mark is saying, Mark Meadows, yeah, we'd like to go further, but we don't really need to. We have all the votes we need. We won the state. If you look, these are the most minimal numbers. The numbers that I gave you, those are the numbers that are certified. Your absentee ballots sent to vacant addresses, your out-of-state voters, 4,925. When you add them up, it's many more times. It's many times the 11,779 number. So we could go through. We have not gone through your Dominion, so we can't give them blessing. I mean, in other states, we think we found tremendous corruption with Dominion machines, but we'll have to see. But we only lost the state that number, 11,000 votes and 779. So with that being said, with just what we have, we're giving you minimal numbers. We're doing the most conservative numbers possible. We're many times above the margin. And so this is insanity. The dude, Raffensperger, literally was like, I talked to Republicans. I talked to the state. We recounted the votes. It's literally like, dude, you lost. That's literally it. You just lost. Fair and square. You lost. No one cheated. We didn't find any cheating. Now, could there have been some form of fraud? I'm sure there has always been some level of fraud in the United States voting system that still doesn't really change the outcome of the election. Oh no, like 0.02% of votes could potentially be fraudulent. Okay? And the dude still lost, regardless if it was in his favor or out of his favor. He still lost. Um, he lost the popular. I don't know what to tell him. The way Trump is going about it is insane. He brought Dominion out of nowhere, and if you listen to the actual audio, he's like, "Oh well, there's certain parts in the Dominion machine. Maybe they put a different part in that machine and took the part that could have given me the election and put it somewhere else." And I'm just like, what the fuck? I mean, that's like that reminds me of like me working with my grandpa on trying to fix his computer, and we're just trying to like figure out like how to get him on the internet or open up his email or like get his phone to like stop making notifications. And it's just like, dude, like that's not how the voting machines work. There's not a special part that like has all the votes on it. Like it has the votes on it, obviously, but like not in the way you think it means, dude. So that's just stupid. And I listened to like some snippets the Post was saying that like, oh, he wants to steal the election. And the guy doesn't want to steal the election. He just genuinely believes he won. And people in his circle, specifically those 12 Republican congressmen, are really, 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 really just kind of pushing him to keep going and fighting this thing for their own opportunistic angles. And I think, this is just the first time where he's lost in life, I think. And that's why this is such a big issue. I don't think there's going to be like a martial law situation. I don't think there's going to be any real, within the next 3 days, any real like ability to stop the election from happening unless Pence does something like crazy. Or this 12-person group expands its influence. It looks like it's either an 1860 or 1876 issue. There was a contention. There was a point of contention in 1876 that resulted. So the election of 1876 was thrown to the House after multiple states sent multiple sets of vote returns showing different outcomes, with vote suppression and fraud happening on both sides. Republicans retained control of the presidency in exchange for ending Reconstruction. Although by this point, the days of radical Republicans were at an end, they were not much better than the Democrats in terms of their civil rights stance and corruption. It almost led to a civil war. So that also happened in 1860. Now, the issue with that is that the reason why I say it's almost like it is because there's not fraud happening on both sides. In fact, there's not fraud happening. It's assumed fraud. That's the issue. It's all assumed fraud. Joe Biden is the next legitimate president, and I'm not saying that as a Joe Biden supporter. I actually didn't vote for him. I voted for the Party of Socialism and Liberation. Like, I voted third party. I voted for the Marxist-Leninist Party. Like, I literally was like probably 0.5% of the population that voted for that party. I didn't like him. I don't like Joe Biden, but he won the presidency. And this is really showing out who the opportunists are in the Republican Party. And that's dangerous that there's like 12 of them. It's a very strong caucus. It's a little dangerous. Now, some people are saying, oh, they're the white supremacist caucus. And it's like, I guess if you want to go that far with it, sure. But, like, they want Trump to stay in power for their own gain, for their own monetary gain. They probably got paid out by him or by a few corporations to make sure Trump gets in. I don't know why they would do that. I think that's really stupid. I don't think it's really anything to seriously worry about, though. The only reason why I'm doing this topic too is because I've had people hit me up and they're like, well, "What are your thoughts on it?" One of my friends was like, "Do you think Biden won the election fairly?" Yes, he won the election fairly. There was just a massive turnout to get Trump out of office. Most people that voted for Biden only did it to get Trump out of office. That's why third parties did ridiculously terrible, actually historically at historic lows, um, as especially compared to 2016. 2016, Americans were like, yeah, let's vote third party and really, see what's going on. Um, but this was just a sad year for third parties because everyone wanted Trump out of office. Um, and then I was asked, did you listen to the Trump tape, which is what we talked about. Now, I think what this shows is that Trump is really just trying to hold on to that office so badly because he really doesn't want to lose it. Uh, and there's a couple of ways to look at it. One, he lost his shit, and mentally he can't handle it, and he's at his breaking point. The second thing, maybe he actually thinks he's a true patriot and that this is going to be a death sentence to the United States of America, and like he failed as a leader or whatever because the people didn't want him to win. He's a crybaby and a sore loser, and he doesn't want to give up because he's been handed everything his whole life. Or four, he's trying to save his ass from going to jail. Now, I don't really... There's probably some tax stuff that he's done over the years that could put him in prison for tax evasion and whatnot, because now his records are going to be open. But then again, I don't think anything's really going to happen to him, because I feel like Joe Biden's going to pardon him for under some civility or healing or whatever. Like Trump's gonna be safe. So I feel like that, that's thrown out of the water. That idea of why he's holding on. The senile part, like where he's just losing his shit a little bit. Like, this job takes a toll. He's the most hated president probably in American history, and he has the internet, and he's getting cyberbullied like 24/7. So it's probably taking a toll on him mentally and emotionally. Or, the other one was that, like, he's been handed everything his whole life, so he probably just can't take a massive defeat like this. But then again, he lost all his businesses, his TV show went off the air, so, like, he's dealt with, like, losing fame and money and power before, but he's always regained it back. I mean, this is the pinnacle. This is the presidency of the United States. If you lose this, like, you're a loser, and that's how he's thinking about it. So it could be one of those. It really could be one of those. Or the, oh my God, I failed my country type of thing. He could seriously just believe in all of that. So I don't really know what to seriously think about, because this could just go in so many different directions. And then there's the real possibility that Trump is going to maintain a public life in the far-right circles and the nationalist circles, and he's going to be a major influence, and the Proud Boys, Patriot Front, all these right-wing groups are going to be more aligned together under Trump and could potentially hold the same, if not a little less, power that anti-fascism and Black Lives Matter holds in the space of street politics. Which would be very interesting to see. That I'm a little concerned about. But at the same rate, after Trump lost, a lot of Trump supporters took down their flags. A lot of them didn't show up to protests or rallies because he lost. A lot of people that voted Trump didn't vote Trump because they're hardcore racists and nationalists, because they really thought he was improving their lives. And when he lost, they're like, oh, well, we respect the American democratic system, and if he lost the election and the government saying he lost and the media saying he lost, that's how it goes. We lost the election. You also have to remember too, in a lot of these right-wing circles, they're like, we're gonna come and shoot the bastard, 2A for life. You're gonna have to shoot me if you take my guns, and a lot of it's just like branding and talk. Most of them won't do that, and most of them can't because they can't shoot straight. If you want to see how the average Republican shoots a gun, go to a gun range. Seriously, go to a gun range. It's pretty pathetic. I'm not saying that leftists are like marksmen either. I mean, I've seen some pretty terrible leftists shoot. In general, civilians can't shoot guns, plan well, or, well, really do anything. It's just tough guy talk on the internet. Um, so I think a lot of it too is just kind of like separating from the hype and looking at what's real and the operational capacity of these organizations. I mean, like on our side, right? We got, on anti-fascism, BLM. We have like uh, the numbers, I guess, the resources. We have community networks, good communication with each other. Um, the only negatives is that we have internal splits on how we want to lead the movement. We don't have solid leaders. We don't have uh, not token organizations like kitchen table names. Like we don't have those like token names like Proud Boys. They're a household name. Patriot Front. They're a household name. And they have leaders that are clearly defined. And they make up, those organizations are leading the movement. And they're better organized than us. And they're better armed. So like that's like the two camps. It's like ambiguous on the left. It's ambiguous. It's decentralized. There's a bunch of organizations. PSL's a household name. IWW's a household name. But other than that, it's all these small little community groups that do mutual aid. And some could be communist, some could be democratic socialist, some could be nothing and just want to help other people. And they're all kind of working together. And then there's these conflicts because everyone thinks differently and no one is right unless you all think like me. So it's, all these things kind of bouncing back into each other. It's hard to organize something cohesive and long-lasting because of all these internal contradictions on the left. On the right, there's internal contradictions based on, do we want to be nationalists or do we want to be Nazis? And what direction is the Republican Party going in? But they're a unit. And there is currently a split going on in the Proud Boys where there's the civic nationalists who are just like, yeah, we're just proud Americans and we're kind of chauvinistic and assholes and sexist and, we don't get laid because of it. But then there's also the part of the Proud Boys that's like, yeah, you want to go do your little civic nationalist thing and drink with all the inferiors? We're going to build a white ethno state. Fuck you. And that's basically what's going on with the Proud Boys right now. So they're at a weak point, but the left isn't taking advantage of that. And they're like a major threat, considering they've committed multiple shootings, killings, and terror attacks at protests in the recent months, specifically in Kentucky. I think about 4 months ago, I remember I was sitting in my room, my apartment upstate during this, like a while ago. So I remember it was like back, but not too far back. Definitely a threat. So these are some things we need to look at. We need to look at like what is, because the government, like we couldn't even get Pelosi out. We were like that close to getting Pelosi out. But governmentally, Joe Biden's going to be the president. We need to focus more on like what's going on in the street. What is there fascism? Does it have a big threat in your local community? What's the left doing in your local community? Is there a base for that? Is there mutual aid programs? These are things that are going to be influenced by what happens in politics nationally. I know that, in my town in upstate New York, there's in Oneonta, there were more protests there and across the country in areas that I've never seen before. Even in Long Island, there's certain towns, it's like, really, we're going here for a protest, and there was a massive protest. So, what happens nationally is, of course, reflecting at the local level and at the street level. But we got to be careful of how we view... we gotta be careful how we just view like the direction of the country. A lot of it's not going to be done from the Republican or the Democratic parties, and I know that's going to be kind of like a shock to some of y'all. But a lot of that change isn't happening. I mean, the squad sold out and voted for Pelosi because they're like, oh, we didn't want to vote, we didn't want to give Trump the upper hand or whatever. It's like, no, you were literally pushing for months to get Pelosi out and force a vote for Medicare for all. And you blew it. Like, you gotta stick to your principles. And here's the thing too, and I know a lot of y'all hate this, but it's a true thing. You either have neoliberalism or neoconservatism. The Republicans are pretty terrible, but they're still going to continue wars. Racism's still going to be an issue. On the left, you got the Democrats, I say left begrudgingly, who are neoliberals, and they want to continue the wars. Racism's not going to get any better. We have the right to abortion, which is great. We have reproductive rights. If the Republicans won, that would be in jeopardy. So that's scary. But both parties are so, like, the level of one being better than the other is, like, so minuscule. And the progressives really could have forced a vote on the House floor for Medicare for All and held Pelosi hostage and said, we'll only vote for you if you pass Medicare for All. And then they would have been seen as not complete sellouts. Even Jimmy Dore did, like, a great episode about this a few days ago where he explained how, like, how they could force the vote and how we could potentially, get Medicare for All. But of course that didn't happen. Because at the end of the day, they're opportunists. They're in a capitalist structure, and the only reason they have jobs and they're allowed to be there is because they're not threatening and they don't challenge the system in a way that is going to threaten its profitability. One thing I'm going to leave y'all with before we end the episode is that if it's allowed to be disseminated to the public, if it's allowed to be voted into office, if it's allowed to be a policy point, it's not a threat to the profit margin, and it's not going to give you the wide sweeping change you thought it would. It's going to have all that character and all that social positives taken out of it, and instead what's going to be in its place is going to be just like fluff and petty reforms that will get you like a quarter of what you asked for. Some people will say that's good compromise, but I mean, it's at the point where, we're charging people for COVID tests and we're going to charge them for COVID vaccines. I thought the whole point was to stay safe and to stay healthy, but how are we going to do that if we don't have the ability to make sure we're safe and healthy? And this kind of just goes back to the Trump tapes. Because when you look at how he's responding to these tapes, that's not safe or healthy for the American people to put our government in this political turmoil right now. And the reason we're allowed to see all this and see him being a complete buffoon is because if the people are not solidly behind Joe Biden and behind him getting instated, that threatens profit from the business class. An unstable government is unstable profit. Stable government, stable profit. And that's why, the Washington Post and all the news outlets are going to say, listen, like, Joe Biden's the legitimate president, and he is the legitimate president. Like, he actually did one fair and square. But the reason why they're fighting so hard to make sure the public believes that and doesn't believe, like, the crazies on the internet is because profit's going to be affected if more and more people are like, yeah, you know what? I don't think the election was legitimate. Let's contest it. Because then that scares the crap out of the stock market, the investors internationally, and that, that will stunt business growth. And that could potentially lead to armed conflict or a series of small terror attacks like what happened in Nashville. But for some reason, is not in the news anymore. And I know why, because the guy's white and they scrubbed it out of the news media. And that's going to be one of the next episodes coming up. I am going to cover the Nashville bombing. I'm still doing some more research on it. And if any of you guys know who is in that area that could speak about the bombing, I'd love to have them on. I just need y'all to tell me. Like, tell them to reach out to me or reach out on behalf of them. Please, I'm begging you. Thank you again for listening to Backpacking America. It is always my pleasure to talk to y'all and be a calming voice of reason and education. I just pulled that out of my ass. That should probably be my new catchphrase. Not I pulled that out of my ass, but reason in education. I think that sounds pretty cool. Anyway, I hope y'all stay safe, and I hope 2021 is not as bad as 2020. Thanks for listening, y'all. Make sure to give BPA a follow on Instagram at Backpacking America and Twitter at BPA Podcasting. Make sure to like BPA on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. The links can be found in the podcast description. Until then, take it easy and stay breezy.